Hey guys, how you doing today? I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the idea of fellowship that we talked about on Sunday in our Kingdom Community series. It says that when they formed a community in the New Testament, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, and we started talking about fellowship. One of the things that's really important for fellowship is conversation. It's conversation, actually communicating with one another. So often in life, we destroy relationships because we're too excited or too forceful with making sure everyone knows what we think. And so often, we're really fast to impress people with what we think and to jump to conclusions assuming we understand what someone else is thinking. When you throw answers at people, everybody just thinks you're the know-it-all. But we don't want to be the know-it-all. We want to be the person that cares about one. We want to be people that care about one another. And so to just kind of illustrate this today, I want to go back to Jesus. Because the disciples formed this incredible community because they knew what it was like to be a part of an incredible community, because Jesus set the example for them. He spent 3 years with them, and Jesus was the master of communication. And so I want to go over a couple scriptures really quick. I'm not even going to go into the whole stories. I'm just going to give a short little quote of questions Jesus asked his disciples. Now, you might know the whole story, and that's great. And if you don't know the whole story, maybe you're going to go look it up. But I'm not even going to give you the context of the questions on all of these. What I want to do is I want to give you the question that Jesus asked, and I want us to become great at asking questions. When we ask questions, we get into the heart of one another. If somebody is doing something and you think it's wrong, maybe you could ask them why. Why are you doing that? Instead of assuming you know the answer. Our thoughts will always go to the worst case scenario. We'll always assume somebody's doing something in absolute rebellion, but maybe somebody is doing something just because they don't understand the situation and you understand something about it more than they do. And so questions are the best way to help you understand where they're coming from and help them understand where they're coming from. And follow-up questions can help us get to incredibly amazing places. So let's just look at a few of the questions Jesus asked. In Luke chapter 9, verse 20, Jesus asked this question to the disciples. Who do you say I am? Man, after following him, he wanted to know if they knew who he was. Also, people were talking about him. And so he wanted to, when people were talking, Jesus would always capitalize on the moment, and he would have a discipleship moment with his disciples. And so he wanted to talk about what other people were talking about. And so other people were talking about who he was. He came up to them and he said, who do you say I am? There was a huge crowd following Jesus, and they were all hungry. And Jesus looked at his disciples and he said, how many loaves do you have? How many loaves of bread? How many fish do you have? In Mark chapter 6:38. Why? Well, he wanted them to think. He wanted them to stop and think about the situation and what they had. And eventually, he would go on to feed the 5,000 with those few loaves of bread. Okay, Mark 10:51 says, what do you want me to do for you? Sometimes we just want Jesus to come up with all the answers, but Jesus wants us to communicate with him. And so in order for relationships, for fellowship to work right, sometimes we need to just step back and say to somebody, instead of assuming we know how we could help them, we could just say, hey, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? And we could build incredible koinonia. In Luke 20:4-5, Jesus said, was the baptism of John from heaven or men? What an incredible chance to jump into a conversation. In Matthew 8:16, he said, why are you so afraid? Why are you so afraid? Mark 2:8, he said, why are you thinking these things? Luke 10:36, he said, which of these three is the true neighbor? And then Matthew 6:26, what good is it for man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? Man, he asked questions to convey points to introduce contemplation, for the disciples to realize where they were at. Jesus was God, so he actually knew the answer to the questions before he asked it, but he knew he needed them to step forward and communicate where they were in these stories, help them realize what they had. And so if you're in a situation where you feel like you know what's going on and you know what the answers are, instead of just barking out answers, then ask some questions to help other people see the whole situation. If you're in a place where you don't understand what's going on, even more important that you ask some questions and get into the heart of that person, so you can see them with empathy, you can see them with compassion, and eventually you form community because you see each other's hearts and you understand them. And so today, what I'm really trying to get at is, in order for there to be a great fellowship of community, there has to be great conversation. And great conversation is not one-sided. It's not dictated. It's a give and take. It's a sharing and a receiving, and it's not an assuming. You ask questions so you can see the heart of a person and understand who they are. So my challenge to you today is to, think of one of these questions I just asked from Jesus, or maybe just think of any other random question. Ask one of your friends a question that you have never asked them before. And then don't be surprised if you learn something about them that you never learned before, if you start to deepen that bond of friendship. Anyhow, man, it was great to be with you guys today. God bless you guys and keep growing.